Okay, my outstanding friends, pay attention to this. Don't dismiss this out of hand. I don't care what you believe. This is evidence from a guy that was actually there on the moon landings. Now, don't thumb me down and be nasty about this thing, please. Just pay attention if you want, or just don't. Go somewhere else, that's fine. But don't just come as soon as you hear a moon or outer space or the earth isn't flat or something like that, you thumb me down. I've been getting this over and over and over. Now, he's going to talk about he's very, very detailed. This is going to be quite long. And a friend of mine met him. The guy's name is Charlie Duke. And he's given this big conference here. He's 90 years old now, or just about. And boy, I'll tell you, at first when I saw it, I thought it was me. But anyway, I'm going to show you Charlie Duke's statements and claims about the moon landings. There were 6 of them. There was 10 scheduled. 4 of them didn't land. 6 of them landed. And he was one of them. I forget which way. I forget what it was. But he was. He gave some very, very, very detailed and very close-up shots that are going to shock you. And I'm going to make statements that are so far over the top that they've been refused to be examined, specifically because they are so over the top. And then I have a bunch of people following me that they don't want to hear anything about space or Mars or anything like that. Immediately thumb me down without even looking at the evidence and ruining me rather than helping me to present this, because this is from Answers in Genesis. These are people that believe in God. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus deeply, and probably more than most of the people that are watching here that think they believe in Jesus deeply. I have a root interaction with Jesus Christ. I'm going to tell you right now, what I am doing right now is directed. Take it any way you want. I don't care what you take. But I'm going to show you what the evidence was to support my claims about the moon and about everything in our life. And everything in our life points to an afterlife that if you don't pay attention, it's not going to be good. That's all I have to say about that. Let's go. Wow, this is kind of amazing. This is supposedly the shot from when they were over Australia headed towards the moon. And this is the Earth. Now, here's the United States. There's California. That looks like it could very well be the North Pole. Look at that thing. Look at that. Check that out. I don't think I've ever seen a shot on Google Earth that shows anything like that. And everybody's talked about the North Pole. There's a lot of revelations need to be revealed, and who knows what that is, but I'm just throwing it in because when I see something that I have a hard time explaining, or I'd like to have explained, I'm going to mention it. Now, he's given some extremely good details. A huge crowd. And here he is standing up talking about being way up here on the tip of the capsule. And everything down here starts shaking, and the whole thing up there is shaking like this, and he says it's really kind of scary. All right, he says this is the picture he took from the Earth at about 20,000 miles away. I'm seeing something there that you don't normally see. See, he even says it. The North Pole is up at the top. All right, this was kind of interesting. He says when they were up in space, in the darkness of space, you don't see any stars. You don't see, because you can't see anything other than the glowing things that are right in the neighborhood. I guess the radiation, you're in sunlight, so the sunlight takes over the other light that's coming at you. So all you see is the blackness of space, which is something I'm going to have to dig into to try to understand that completely. That's kind of a mind bender right there. All right, these 6 spots, the green ones, were where they landed. Now this, I have some information about this right here. All right, the red ones are Russians, where they put unmanned spacecraft up there apparently to see what's going on. You know, I don't understand how they can determine where the equator is. The moon is stationary and it just follows the Earth. It's not spinning. If it was spinning, it would have, like it'd have a north and south pole. But if it's just going around like this, where's the equator? I guess you'd say it's in the middle of our visual plane. So we can see the moon is here, and this would be the middle of it. But it's not. If it doesn't spin, I wouldn't call that an equator, but that's what they're calling it. I guess it's this right here. All right, so he's saying the equator is right here. Is right above where they landed, right in the middle, apparently. The equator is right above where we landed in these southern shots. The green is there. All right, he went to the highlands of the moon, and he said the rocks were totally different up there, where they'd been collected. Totally different. Let's see what he has to say.
Down on the Mare, and so we were very excited to be assigned to that land.
All right, so they found something totally different than the ones that were apparently 8,000 feet below. All right, something I found very interesting. This is what's called the Mare Imbrium. Now, well, there's another one over here. All right, what I want you to listen to is he's saying they found rocks that were totally different than the ones that were 8,000 feet below. Listen.
The equator is right above where we landed, and we landed a little east and a little south of center. We landed at a place called the Descartes Highlands, and it was the mountains of the moon. And if Neil Armstrong, where he landed, was what we call sea level, we were 8,000 feet above, and we were the only flight that went up to explore the surface, the mountains of the moon. Rocks were totally different up there than where they'd been collected down on the Mare, and so we were very excited to be assigned to that landing.
That's interesting to me because I study the rocks. Okay, there's the lunar module. It weighed 25,000 pounds. There's your little buggy. Now this is where they're up on the highlands. They're looking out here, and this is the view. There's not much to see, but you got to see what you see to understand what you're looking at. Okay, here's something else you want to look at. Look at the depth of the feet going in here. That's kind of deep into this very, very soft, literally dust. There's no question there has never been any moisture raining down on here. There's no rivulets. There's no indication whatsoever of moisture raining down. There could be plenty of moisture up there. I'm not saying it's not, but it doesn't condense and turn into rain and create rivulets and little runoff and so forth. So right away we can see there is a pretty good depth of literally dust on the moon. Okay, I'm back again. Here we go. He is saluting the flag.
You can see the footprints. The moon is covered with dust, very, very fine like powder, which is actually pulverized rock. There's no dirt on the moon that we would call soil. There's nothing like that. It's just pulverized rock.
Well, I would like to look into that a little better. It was at one time a fleshy substance which has basically cooked into dust. That would be my interpretation.
And as you walk on it, you step on it and it compresses very quickly, so you can see that you only make a footprint maybe 2 inches at the most. But everywhere you walked, you left your footprint. Everywhere you drove, you left your tracks. A lot of people don't believe we landed on the moon. They said, well, look at the flag. The flag is waving in the breeze, and there's no atmosphere on the moon. NASA was so stupid that they put this flag up, and it's blowing in the breeze. Well, it's not blowing in the breeze, it's held out by a curtain.
You can see the damn thing is sticking out here. It's just wrinkled, that's all. I don't, well, maybe it was flap. If it was flapping, that's different. I don't think it was flapping.
Right. And it was vacuum packed, and I couldn't pull the wrinkles out of it. And he didn't give me an iron to iron the flag, so anyway, I took this, John took this picture, that's me saluting, and 72 hours later, before we left, we took another picture of the flag and it had the same wrinkles in it. So we really did land on the moon, and 5 times actually. A picture of the rover. John was the driver, I was the navigator, and this car was folded up and bolted on the outside of the spacecraft. And so when we get there, we deployed it and assembled it. And it's the only car I've ever had where if you didn't like your parking place, John got on his side and I got on my side, and we picked it up and walked off with it. The car weighed 80 pounds up on the moon. A good view of the rover, and the antennas pointed up at the Earth. And when the antenna, he stopped, he pointed it.
I just want to make one mention there. He just said it weighed 80 pounds up on the moon. And that's because the moon doesn't have the same gravity. Obviously, that's why when they walk, they look like they're bouncing around and so forth. And the dust sort of is not slammed to the Earth like it is here on Earth. All right, he's right on the edge, he says, of something called Plum Crater. Now, these little dishy spots are not always impacts from craters. I mean, from asteroids or meteorites or whatever you want to call it. Some, or most, I would say, are biological anchor spots, so that thing was invested with very fleshy stuff, gooey stuff. And that's why he says it's very powdery. It's not like rocky. It was the synovial fluids that flow around. It's called lymph. And it's just nothing more than a fluidy stuff. It has minerals in it to some degree and bacteria and so forth, but it all just would settle down as more or less of a paste, let's put it that way, and then be cooked by the sun. It would be turned into what you see there. Okay, they're raking up soil, and he says the soil compressed very quickly. That's because it's made of such fine particulates, because it is literally fine lymph fluid that has just dried out. So it's extremely particulated, and it compacts quite quickly and easily. Now, I don't think there's any moisture to speak of up there, but I don't know that. You see, they're really trying to understand how this soil that they're calling it, this around the moon, it compresses very quickly, but it's unconsolidated at even 3 meters. All right, so they went 10 feet down and took a core and brought it back, and it still was just dusty, basically, which was, the size of the moon is enormous, and the size of that layer of fluids is going to be also enormous. They're not going to hit that, I don't care how well, they could drill maybe a mile or so, and then they would get out of that area and into some solidness of the tendon. Okay, check this out. That is a tendon enthesis. That means a ball that locks a tendon strap into a body part so that it can pull against it, but it won't pull that ball out of there. Now that ball, you see all the wrinkles? You see all the wrinkles here? What happens is it grows like a fleshy layer across that, which is the membrane and all that business. It's all fluidy, and there's not a lot of substance there. It's a fluid-filled highway, basically. And I found them in the mud fossils. They're fluid-filled highways that run inside these tendons and muscles and so forth. There's an extreme number of layers of tissue. And what happens, you see those two spots there? There's a vein and an artery that has to feed the tendon, and then the enthesis, this ball, but at that point it becomes locked in its own self. So the blood has to flow in through there and back out. And so you need a blood supply, an in and out. And there's something that they don't know about, I don't think, is there's also a supply for the synovial fluids that run around it, because that's what's called the interstitium. It's a fluid-filled highway. It's just under the top. And in there is all the is a membrane that controls all the enzymes and so forth and kills all the invaders that try to infiltrate this. It's your membrane. It's your separation between this thing and the rest of the universe. And that, my friends, is the same as that. That broke off just like this would break off. And guess what? Our moon, that is Mimas, which is a moon. And our moon is the same. You see all that stuff? Our moon ripped off, but our moon, I think, was from an aponeurosis tendon. You see that right there? That's a vein and an artery. That artery, the red one, is the artery. It has no valve in it. You see that one? See that little valve? That's the vein side. That's the black side. That's the red side. The red side has all the red blood. This is, of course, a shadow, so it's showing up dark, but it is, in my mind, the vein, the artery and the vein. So it goes in, services the thing, and then comes back out. Very little activity inside a tendon. It's almost all solid metalish things. Now, remember I told you there's two things? There's a lymph. There's where the lymph comes in. You see one of them's red and one of them isn't? Same as this here. This services the layers right here, this top layer. This services just below the skinish part, all right, which is the tight junctions, the cells that form the tight junctions. And that filters the fluids through here, and they are very slippery synovial fluids. They're very, 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 very fine and slippery. And I imagine if they match what they drilled down and took out of there, they will find that that matches synovial fluid chemistry. That would be in my opinion right now, because that's, you need to be able to do the synovial fluids, which is the lymph, and you need the blood supply, which is there. And this whole scab pulled off. Now, either, I say this was, I think I found somewhere where it came across here and latched in, which is a aponeurosis tendon. Aponeurosis tendon, well, let me just show you. All right, this gets a little medically complicated, but it's not that hard to understand. A tendon, all you want to care about is that a tendon locks a muscle or something else. Like a ligament is basically a tendon with a ball on each side, holding tight to each other. So if you had a bone, I have one around here somewhere, like this. It has a tendon, a ligament attachment here. So it's a bone like that, you see? And they stay together throughout the entire life of the creature. So there's one ball on this side, and when there's one ball on that side, and it lets you rotate and do all kinds of very exotic things. Now this is a mud fossil. Everything I have here is I've learned from mud fossils. And that's a bonehead. And now, this is the balls we've been talking about. A regular tendon comes down and has a straight fiber coming in, and the ball is at the end, just like you see here. That's pretty much tendon from bone to bone and from ligament to ligament. All right, now there's another type which is called aponeurosis, and I think that's where our moon came from, an aponeurosis. I'm not sure though. It could have just popped right off. Well, let's look. All right, so this is basically tendon to bone. It just comes down and locks in the bone so it can't pull out. The muscle pulls against the tendon. The tendon just goes a little like this, and the muscle depending on how strong you are. It can pull you a lot or just a little. Now, so that's the normal tendon. You see there's a ball on a little strap for each one of those. And this is what it looks like as it starts to grow. All right, the tendon is an insertion point, and it starts to grow this, and these, you see this is the cells and the glial expressing cell, the minerals. Anyway, it grows and it creates a ball of minerals in the center, and then you have this layer of attachment. And when they pull off, they all pull off the same way. I don't care if it's a regular tendon or it's an aponeurosis. Now let's look at the aponeurosis. But here's the spot that it's going to pull off. Now they're not showing where the blood and so forth enters, but there's a very small amount of blood that enters in there and just swishes around and goes back out to keep this thing alive, I guess. All right, you see this? This is a whole different issue here, aponeurosis. Well, it's not different. It's similar, but it is different. What happens here is these little straps start coming off from your muscles that girdle you, and they are the straps that have to attach. So there's a little fiber comes out, and then it actually goes through the skin. Well, let me show you. I can actually show you it doing its job, but think of this way. It has to come across and go through somewhere and anchor below so that it can pull on something. All right, because the whole thing here is anchored. There's a whole batch of them here, 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 here. All those are anchors because they have to service all these different muscle fibers. Now, and so there's rows and rows and rows and rows of them, not just one set of anchors at the very end. There's a whole batch of them in here. All right, that's the type of tendon we're talking about. It has the ball, and the ball would normally be down here locked into the tissue that's below this aponeurosis flat strap. So the flat strap is attached to this fiber. You see it? It's coming up from, it's actually part of the flat strap, this fiber. But it comes up and it goes through a little slot. You see the little slot? And the strap goes up, it goes down through and attaches to the ball. What that allows to happen is the ball stays here and the tendon can get pulled up this way and come back. It's got a little bit of a throw to it, and that's about it. It's not going to go any further than that. If it does, it rips the ball out, and that's what happened here. So this can go only a certain distance, and there's stacks after stacks after stacks of them. And they can go just enough to keep it from ripping out. And this one went a little too far, and that's a pulled tendon, and it's painful. And these materials were used in South America, in places, well, all over the world, really. I've seen them in the pyramids, too. Same stuff, the same tendon with a little bump sticking off it. They cut them in slabs and used them. They had machinery here, they had all kinds of things. So there's a lot that isn't right in our history, and we're being told. But as far as the moon thing, it sure looks reasonable to me. And I understand the moon is a body part, just as Bennu is, that they went out and took it, a sample back and brought it back to Earth, and it's muscle. I mean, there's no question about that. And they admit it has all that same exact identical characteristics, and the chemistry, and the DNA, and the RNA, and the uracil, and the amino acids, and all the organic chemistry. And it has the membranes, it has the phosphates, it has the sarcomeres, it has the rope cable, which is the muscle, but it's too far out from their ability to understand this is true. And this was what was written in the ancient texts. Every single culture on the face of this planet said that the earth was made out of the parts of giant creatures, or is a giant creature. One or the other, 100%. And they all had dragons, and they all had giants, and all that stuff is also true. All right, so we've seen a tendon with the straps coming down. We have seen the aponeurosis tendon. how it locks into the body and girdles you. So it has to lay flat like that, and then the ball comes off the ends all over the place. And they grab in so they can pull and do all that kind of stuff, sit-ups and stuff. And then we have seen how they can dislodge, all right, and rip out, and how they actually attach and let the tendon do that. We have seen that. And here's what they look like when they're big. All right, just take your time. Take your time. This guy or person, whoever it is, walking on top of the strap that came down just like I just showed you, through the tissue that would have been here, which has eroded away. You see all this eroded away stuff? That would have been the tissue. There's another one that was right here, another one of these straps coming down to the ball, and this would have been all in the tissue right here. Remember how the other ball is ripped out? Well, in this particular case, the pH or the chemistry, whatever it was, washed away this fleshy substance or whatever was down here that this anchored in. And it happens all over the place. You get different outcomes. The same exact tendon somewhere else could be turned into quartz, could be turned into all kinds of different things. It depends on what invaded it. It's called nucleophilic substitution by invasion. All right? And what happened is everything in the earth got boiled away to virtually nothing. All that was left was the fabric, basically, and then it got reinvested with whatever was in that area, and it just filled it back in. I have things that are actually just like a piece of meat, and somehow that got stuck in a big, gigantic ball of meat, and then by the very end, it's kept everything it had going on, the membranes, the tendons, connective tissue, the flesh. I have everything. And here's the hair follicle I show every time, which has the muscle attachment here, so it can go up on end like this. This is somewhere on your arm or somewhere. On your face, you don't have the muscle. There's the sebaceous gland where the gooey stuff drips down so your hair can go up easily. There's the root. And that's where it gets invested with blood here. Now that is completely transitioned, except for the membranes. The membranes don't have the same situation. You see, like there's a membrane around this. By the way, look at this. There's another one of these balls right here. That one broke off, and that could very well be from this one. But they're everywhere. They're all over the place. That aponeurosis tendon, you got to be locked in tight. And the more work you do with your body, the more flexible they will become. They work with synovial fluids. And synovial joints, which is the synovial fluids, are the slipperiest thing known to humanity. Teflon on Teflon is like 1,000 times more scrubby than synovial fluids. That's why you just never feel anything. If everything's going good and you can move, you're good to go. Once you stop moving, that stuff locks up, and you get this. There's somewhere else. I don't know where this came from, but it's another tendon, which is the aponeurosis style. And that's what I think our moon is, the aponeurosis style. We have to look at where it ripped off. Did it rip off uniformly? And I say no. This is more like ripped in this direction. You see this here? And you can see the wrinkles coming this way, I believe, when I really looked into it. I can't remember now, but I think, I don't know. I believe it was ripped this way, and I don't believe this was a standard bone in place tendon. I believe this is an aponeurosis tendon. Still has the blood stuff coming into it through the strap. And it also has the lymph fluids that surround it through the fluid-filled highway going in and out. You see this? He said they drilled down 10 feet and it still was just all the same particulates. They would have to drill all the way through that red to get down to here. I don't know how deep that is, but it's got to be many hundreds of feet. So they're never going to get down till they hit the lower level. So they could be going through this stuff here. And they have to get down through it. And it's just all, this is another fossil. This is a fossil, just like the moon is a fossil. And they have to get down to this layer or that layer, one or the other, somewhere to change that gooey stuff, which coats everything. Everything that is like a tendon or a membrane, and everything you have is coated by membranes. And this is coated by a membrane. That's all it is the membrane. You got to get through that membrane before you get down to the innards of the tendon, of the enthesis. And this is the protection layer, so they were never going to get down to it. And that's why you see these different colors. And these, red blood always seems to create green life. And I think that's red blood, and I don't know about that. All right, but this, I'm virtually certain now this isn't a ponerosis tendon. You see, this is, I believe, was pulled this way, ripped this way, like pulled back. This looks much flatter than this. You see that? And each one of these is a layer of tissue. The red is the layer of the gooey substance that coated it, which is the membrane. The yellow is just below the membrane, which is like a layer of cells that are tight junctions that separate the membrane from the inside of the body of the ball. And again, we got our blood supplies. We've got our interstitial fluids that service the yellow part. A lot to be learned here, my friends. We're not paying attention to the details. I look at the little details and see, can you explain this? And I'd like to have it explained. And again, you see how some of this is ripped away and it's sort of bleeding into there. This is ripped. This is pushed back. This is just as flat as can be. It's just ripped, like peeled back. And this is ripped away. So I'm going with a ponerosis. I have all the details here, and there's things that they can't explain, they just won't discuss. This is down in, I believe it's Bolivia, I believe. These tire tracks are here from it looks like some kind of thing drove up here and anchored itself in here while this was still wet, because all of these giant creatures died in the Great Flood just as was advertised throughout history. And they cut all these slabs and made walls out of them. Remember I showed you this is from these flat aponerosis tendons. They use them extensively down there. Although this is an Achilles tendon, this one here. And they cut the slabs out of them and they made these walls. They didn't do that with chisels. This was done with some kind of equipment. They were here. There was some kind of creatures here that we never could talk about. We never could explain, so we just decided not to talk about them. And it said in the ancient text there was giants in the earth in those days. Yes. And now I have all, look at this. This is the pregnant lady stone. I think it weighs like 1,200 tons or something like that, they say. Well, whatever. It's a good size tendon. That's a tendon. Now I have the exact same thing here in my shop, a little bit smaller than that. And these break off right here just flat. Nobody cut that. And right in here is where the attachment is to the gluey substance that glues the tendon to the muscle. And I have it right here. That's the tendon. Exactly what is the pregnant lady stone. This is the gluey substance, and they break off just as flat as can be. You see this one down below? they move like this. When you move like this, these have to move like that. That's what a synovial fluid is. And this is the glue. This is a really gluey, gooey stuff, and it somehow goes into those little cavities and holds tight. And I mean tight. Tendons are in, and then they should never pop out unless you really exceed their limit, which this guy did. That's painful. I've done that myself. So it's not, and you probably have too. You maybe didn't realize it. But anyway, I have so much evidence on this. It's just staggering. And you know, all of these, they call them magma intrusions or something. I don't know what they call it. Everything to a geologist is volcanism and magma. This is tendon. This is tendonism. And you end up down at these fibrils. And I'm talking, when you want to know how small something can be, you look at one of these, which I will show you uno momento. As they come down, they just keep getting multiplied by billions. By the time they're down here, I can't even imagine how many there's coming out of there. But here it is right here. That's at the very bottom where they come out. And I mean, I'm talking, those things there are finer than the finest silk, whatever. And it's just a bazillion of them. That's just from one little strap that comes down to one ball. And when I talk about the number of balls that are in your body, you just couldn't even believe it. All right, remember I told you won't believe how many balls are in your body? You see this? Beneath every layer of membranes, let's go with that, there's these balls and straps which keep the fabric, which is the membrane, from ripping apart and tearing and all this. They're supposed to be tight junctions. So they have to have some integrity, and the balls and the straps create the integrity. They now call this layer, this white layer here, the interstitium. I discovered this in 2015 in my mud fossils, and nobody knew anything about it. And they still really don't. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, because this is the layer that goes to those two little tiny spots that keep this separated from all the other fluids. This is the lymph fluids. This is the bodily fluids. They do mix and they don't mix. In this layer, they don't mix. When they get flushed into the bloodstream, they do mix, and then they go back and they get cleaned up and they go back in through. It's a little complicated, but trust me, they didn't realize this even. It says meet your interstitium, a newfound organ. They didn't realize this was here. And all of these little balls and straps are underneath there, and they're all over the earth, and I mean all over the earth. I showed you those little balls. Look at this. Let me see if I can find it. Look at this. These are the balls we're talking about. Little black spots. See them? Now they have a strap around them, a little spring. It opens up that fluid-filled bag. So you end up with a squishy stuff on you, so you can do all that stuff. And it's supposed to come back to where it was anchored. And these can get flat, they can push, they can do this, they can do that. And here's what it looks like in extreme, electron microscope. This is how many balls there is. It's just stunning. The number of balls is just outrageously, ridiculously enormous. And they are on the skin of the earth as well. You see these here? These are Moki marbles. The whole flesh has eroded away down to where you're the basement layer of skin, right underneath, and these are those balls. Here it is over in the United Kingdom, Hunstanton Beach. The balls are eroding out of the wall, and here they're laying in their own mud, because the mud is nothing more than the flesh that eroded out of the wall. And the top of that is skin. It's just exactly like this. If I washed all that stuff down, the skin would collapse, which it has. You see it down here? And that would turn into red flesh, which you see it down here. So the skin, you're eating away at this, which is easily eaten away at. It's soft. Eventually, the white crashes down, which is the skin. The balls do not deteriorate easily, and they're being eaten now because they still have flesh on them, which was from here. Now, that's what's going on with the moon. The moon still has flesh on it. Or, well, it did have flesh on it. I don't know if it still does, but this is the layer of the tissue, which would have been the fleshy stuff in that spot in the United Kingdom. There's something eating it, and up in Alaska they have the same thing, only they're the freshwater ones. So here we are, Huntington Beach. All right. Whatever this moss is, or whatever it is, it's eating away. These are not stromatolites. They say, oh, they just grow there. No, they don't. These are some kind of moss or whatever, eating away at the flesh, the biological flesh that's there. They sell blood meal. It's very, very nutritious for plants. And here's what happened in Alaska, and all where it was frozen. This is the skin that was the skin of the creature. And now every one of those little balls, which I just showed you, they're everywhere, is covered with this same moss. This was inside the creature's body. It had to be. It had to be. And the same thing with the other ones over Huntington Beach. Now, every now and then you're going to see a chunk of blood here and there. Blood, blood, blood. Blood. There is going to be some minerals, some bloody chunks and that sort of stuff, but virtually everything here is one of those balls. And not only that, these things roll. That growing stuff turns towards the sunlight, and they can never figure that out either. I have a cross section of one of these, and you can see there's the ball, just like the Moki marbles, exactly the same stuff, and they should understand this. They need to get a biologist and an anatomist and somebody with a microscope to look at this stuff. I mean, it's just, and you don't need much of a microscope to see that. These are going in there, just like I showed you on our moon. And the things they didn't understand is the other ones are the interstitial fluids, and they stay totally separated. And that's what I discovered. And I'm going to I have something right here that I can show you exactly this case. Because this is where the membrane is. This is the flesh. Well, where the membrane attaches right here to the next organ or shoulder or wherever, it has to make that fluids go too. They still have to stay separated from here. And they do by going out through these two little dots. And I will show you those dots in my microscope. I got that puppy fired up. We'll take a look at it right now. All right, before I put this in the microscope, what I want you to understand is this is basically flesh. Now, a little bit of moisture helps to bring out the color and so forth. And it's got marbling or whatever's in your connective tissue and so forth. Now, what it has here is the membrane that surrounds it. And normally it's like see-through thin. I mean, it's just very, very thin, you see it? But where it comes together to attach to the next body part, it pinches together and it invests itself here so that it won't pull out. And then this little flap comes down and there's two little dots, which is the separation between the fluids of the membrane and the blood. And I'll show you those two little dots right now. Okay, this is the latch, which I'm going to show you up here, and the transfer of the synovial fluids. This is something I don't think that medicine understands yet. And I'm going to drag you through this. You're going to see it. This is very, very hard to dismiss. Now, if you look carefully, there's going to be two dots down here. We'll get to those in a moment. This is the flesh. This latch connected this chunk of meat to whatever it was, a shoulder or whatever. Now, here's the way it comes down. It comes down to a little tag right here, which is tough as hell. And that's the center of it. And they all come together like this, right here, and then it just splays out all over, just like it does in chicken tissue. And you get to this part, like up here, whoops, where it's just nothing but skin. I mean, a very, very fine membrane. It's hard to see, but it's, well, you can see how it's real tough and scruffy here. And then it comes down to this spot. And these two little dots. Now I'm going to get down closer, but this is tough, tough, tough. And it has to keep the fluids that are in this layer separated from the fluids that are in this layer. That's why we have these two sets of holes. The two in the center and the two little ones on the outside. You see that? That's the chicken tissue. I'm sorry, that's my mud fossil. And here's the chicken tissue right here. It's the exact same thing. It gets all tightened up down at the end there and makes it real tough little knotty thing there you spit out. All right, you see the difference here is this is blood. This is blood inside of a bone, going from this bone to somewhere else. There was two tubes coming out, and I'm going to show you that right in a second. And they have these holes, and that's where blood and nerves and so forth go in and out. All right, now this is a head of a bone, and it was the type of a bone that locked like a wrist, I believe, something like, well, another bone locked right into there using this particular ligament. And the other side would have had a ball in it, so there'd be a ball here attached to another ball, and they stay for your whole life, and that is one of the toughest materials that there is. Now, you can see there's a scab here. It's quite obvious. And it formed in one of these holes. I don't even know if it was from this bone. It might not have been, but this was a long time ago. And I moved it. Well, first of all, let's go back a step. The membrane on here is pretty well shot on that one. So we're not seeing the interstitial layers. That stuff has washed away, and we're pretty much down to where the bone actually was, but it's been replaced. That's what this is all about. Mud fossils means they're now what you'd call mudstone. You look at it, you say it's mudstone. It's just a muddy rock. No, it's not. That was a bone, and when it got boiled out really well, some blood was left in it. The red blood is just amazing how it stays around. Oh, by the way, there is one little tiny bone spot here. And I'll show you that in the microscope. That's the last little bit of bone was in here. You don't find them with bones. So here we are. That's the scab. Now, if we go from the scab and remove the scab down to the fibrin, which is a substance that makes a web. Well, you can see how webby that is. It's like a spider web. And that's where the red blood cells start to collect and create the scab. Now, you see that little black spot right there? You see that red one right there? That's where blood transferred from here into the next bone, or wherever it went to. I have no idea where it went to. So I went a little deeper, and I went down to those spots to look at them specifically. And that's this shot. There's a hole right there that led off a tube of black blood, which is your vein blood. And that tube right there led off your artery blood. And that's just the nature of blood. You have to have an artery and a vein. The artery pumps blood out with all the good stuff into it, into your body, and the other one comes back with the bad stuff. Well, used stuff, and it goes back to get recycled. This was bone. Well, yeah, I suppose it was bone, and almost all of it's been replaced. But there are little spots here and there that you could actually detect bone. And this one here, right there, that little tiny bitty spot, still has bone in it. And I guess I'll show you that right now. But don't forget what I showed you about this. Let me just finish up with this right here. Those are those two dots. You see those two dots? And one of them's white and the other one's got a little black to it. That's at the tip of every one of these anchors that goes between a bone to tendons, between lungs and the cavity in your gut. Everything has to be anchored, and when it anchors, it has to keep the fluids that are in this interstitium layer separated from these fluids. There's two sets of fluids. Okay, this is the broken end of the bone. This is basically the center. This is the last bit of actual bone, and we're going to get in real close. Now, this is what they call bone black. When bones break, they give out black substance, because this is where it's creating the blood cells, or I'm not sure what it is. It's a bone marrow, so it's doing something in here with a lot of blood. And that's why you get this black. Now, it's sucking up the moisture. I always put moisture on it, but you can see a lot of red, a lot of black. And this is the bone itself. And that right there is the actual bone that's left. You see how it has a seam around it? You know, that's like this bone around the, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a border that surrounds it. Well, actually it isn't. Hold on. Sometimes it's hard to see exactly what you are seeing in a microscope. We're right there. Okay, so it isn't a border. That's a drop-off. This is a drop-off. The bone is fractured here. So this would have actually been bone, that white. So that's a drop-off. All right. At first I saw that as a border coming around here, but it's not. It's a drop-off. This is way lower than here. So let's get a good shot at this really up close, which is the bone. Okay, this is the bit of bone that's coming down from the break. And this is the edge of the bone. I thought before there was an edge down here that was attached to this, but it's not. This is the edge. It's very clear now. You can see this is quite a bit further down than this. So this is the actual edge of the bone, and this is actual bone that did not convert into mud fossil. Now, this, I believe, is a muscle bundle right next to it that did not completely erode either. I'm going to get a little closer onto this, but this is unusual. In my mud fossils, I almost never find actual bone, because bone would turn into other things easily. All right, its chemical nature made it dissolve or turn into other things. Primarily dissolve, which made it turn into other things. So let's, because it would have been reabsorbed. I think I just figured it out. They almost never preserve the bits of bone. The reason is it's right next to the blood. The blood is stabilizing that bone. That looks like the artery. Well, I'm almost certain it is. And it's on this bone. And I think it's like running up underneath here, because that's one of those bones that attaches. And it looks like this is where the blood came, the artery and the vein, and leaked over in and preserved that bone. I'm telling you, the blood is the preservative. It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it's no question whatsoever, it's true. And this, you see this? This is either it's not the whole artery. I think this is the artery and the vein right here. Could be wrong. I think this is a bundle of muscle that is in that joint. Now, I know it's overwhelming if you haven't been exposed to mud fossils yet, but I have to do this to stir some interest and to make my claims, because if they won't answer to my claims about these things, that means I win. That means I'm correct. If you're an expert and you're saying, oh, this happened and that happened and and all these different stories, and then you will not address my evidence, speaking about these being tendons and these being the straps and they just snapped them off. Nobody can explain all kind of things here. These were wet, moist at the time that they constructed these walls. They put them up just like putty. That's why the equipment they had sunk in just like that. You see that? That's the whole width of this platform, whatever it was. And it looks like it drove right around here and drove right up here and sunk into the mud, or, you know, into the tendon. And this right here, the white stuff is connective tissue. A tendon starts somewhere in the connective tissue, and then it tapers off into basically flesh. And it looks to me like they were cutting flesh here. I don't think this is like tendons. There's other ones that were tendons. This here, I think they were like at the end of the ponerosus tendon and then digging into the flesh. It looks to me, I could be wrong. You see, I think that white spots that that thing was sitting on would be like right here, and they were digging into these fleshy spots. Maybe. I don't know. But it was absolutely wet when this thing was here. It was sunk into the wetness of this. And those walls went up wet, so they just don't, there's no gaps. They were like big balls of putty. Now, they had some very, very sophisticated people doing this. This is not easy to do, I wouldn't imagine. But they had equipment. And who knows what else they had. They were moving these gigantic things. And even like these stone blocks. Look at the size. This is a guy here. These things were staggeringly enormous. And still they moved them. They did buildings out of them. But the creatures that were here, the giant human beings, and they were giant human beings, so don't laugh. It's true. And mine are. I have ones that are from, well, this one here would be from somebody a couple 100 feet tall or more. I have ones that are DNA tested. One of them's a 4-foot wide hand, and that's only about 50 feet tall, that guy. Then I have another one that's a 3-foot long fingertip. And these are DNA tested, and that would be a couple of 100 feet tall. So they could pick up these blocks. That's not gigantically, you know, 2 or 3 guys pick that up and go build something with it. And this is always written in the ancient text. I'm sorry, we just got to re-examine everything that we were told. And as far as I'm concerned, those two right there are the interstitial fluids separating this layer of yellow from this layer of flesh from underneath. So it's basically the membrane. It's the fluid-filled highway. Anything that tries to get through there to attack that when it was alive, that creature inside would be killed by the fluids that are in this lymph. And that's why you're never going to get, he went 10 feet down in there, you're never going to get to the bottom of that until you get down to here. And then that's the basement layer. You see that? This is Getty Images, Steve Gushmishner. These are what these little fibers end up getting into. Is right at the end where the bone flares out. Originally, there's a strap of tendon. It's just a strap. It's not separated, basically. It's a mat. And it comes down, and at the very end, these all flare out here. And they actually embed into this back area here. See it? Which is up in here. You can see basically the same sort of stuff. And this is what anchors that tendon, so it can pull really hard, tough. And then normally that would come out to a bone, I mean a muscle at the end, which would run to pull that. Human body is absolute stunning work of art. Okay, you saw those tendon fibers. Well, here is what they anchor into. That's the back of the bone. All right, they call these epiphysis. Epiphysis, and all these little holes are where those little fibers came and anchored. They're all boiled out and, you know, from cooking basically. Every now and then you see a little colored green there. I don't know why. You see all those holes? That's where those little fibers were going. I mean, there's I don't know, there's got to be tens of thousands of them. I would say at least. And this is just the surface of the cut. This is three-dimensional. This is not like one spot here. It's a whole ball of these. A whole ball. You see down in there? You see that hole going down in there? The one up. I can't let go of this. Hold on. Oh, never mind. I'm telling you, it's three-dimensional. So this whole thing here, hold on. What we're looking at is this. This is three-dimensional. There's a bazillion holes going all this way, would have gone all the way to this way. And there's all of these attached in there. It's just a stunning number of fibers going through there attaching. Stunning number. Okay, my friends, if I haven't shocked you yet, if you're new to my stuff, I'm going to give it another shot. This is a cavity in the earth, and these are these crystals. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a guy standing there doing whatever he's doing there. This, my friends, is the inside of a tendon enthesis. And here's what it looks like if you were inside of it. You see that? Mineral. All right, this is one of those bone anchors. And inside the ball, just imagine the sizes of these creatures. And the moon being a tendon wall, it's just one of these tendon walls. I don't know, one of these or somewhere. Some anchor, it is. And our moon is a tendon anchor. I'm sorry, you know, I don't see why I should hide this. I don't see why I should be afraid to bring this up for a topic of discussion. I say that that's the interstitial fluids, and this is where the bodily fluids go in to service that ball and come back out, and this is the membrane, and they will never get to a solid substance until they hit the bottom basement layer. I mean, the evidence I have is so completely overwhelming. I'm not going to bother going deeper into it. You see, remember I think I might have shown you this before. That rock is in there because it has a ligament. These things are tough. Those fibers, when you put those fibers like this thing here, there's so many fibers, you just can't break them. They had one that it was like a really tottering one, something very similar to that. And they tried, I think they had a dozen elephants or something trying to push it over. They couldn't push it over. And the trovants are the same thing. Trovants are ligaments. They're just a bunch of balls all together in a knot coming out of the earth, and they call them trovants. I think they're in Bulgaria or somewhere. The earth was a biological creature, or creatures. Well, creatures, that's pretty certain. And, you know, this like here, you see this? You look at it and say, ooh, how'd that happen? Well, I can tell you exactly how it happened. This is like a shoulder joint. And the tendon has to go this way and that way. And in between each one of these is what I call slurpees. You see these little things here? That's where that synovial fluid is here, so that they can twist and move and do all these kind of things. Up here where the joint is, you don't have so much movement, you just have a little bit. Here you need a lot of slurp. And they do, they have a lot of slurp down here, you see it? And those create the tight junctions. I have all this stuff down. It's not like I'm guessing at any of this stuff. You just have to look up tight junctions. Well, I'll show you. See, there it is right there. These are the plasma membranes. These are tight cell junctions. You have to have them tight, but they've got to be able to do this and that and move, and that's what this Slurpee does. And you say, well, if you can show me that, you should be able to show me some big ones. And I said, well, yes, you want big ones? I got big ones right here. These are huge, huge blocks. And I think this was from POV or from Desert Drifter. The poor guy died in an accident. But these are cell membranes, which coat like skin, tight junctions. And the same thing as I just showed you here. And I have other places I can show you a lot of this. It's everywhere. It's not like it's just here or there. It's just people haven't understood what they're looking at, and they just sort of say, wow, that's interesting. Yep, have a nice day. Well, I really want to understand what I see, and I do now. And I think you do too, if you've been paying attention. I'd love to have some interaction with some scholarly people that claim that, no, this can't possibly be. That can't be a tendon. It's too much. This is magma. This is intrusive volcanic magma. No, it's not. And the things that are laying on the earth are not either. And Bennu, that just came back, the mussel they brought back from asteroid Bennu, is here for 2 years, and they can't accept exactly what they found, which is 100% certain. It's a heart. It has I think I've gone through this a number of times. I've gone through it so many times in the last 2 years. I couldn't count that high. I've never been good at counting, but I've done it many, many times. And these are nothing more than tendons. You say, well, what are all these little blocks doing? Well, how come they break flat like that? Well, because they're tendons. Did you hear what I just said? They're tendons. You say, whoa, how come a tendon has little blocks? Well, because it's a tendon. You see it? These are tendons. All right, these are the collagen fibers. That means they have all kinds of different chemical characteristics that give them strength and flexibility and rigidity and all kinds of different things. There's like 28 different types. That's why they have different colors. And they bundle them up into bundles that can snap right across flat as a pancake. Is that what you see at Giant's Causeway? And you see it in many, many, many places because the earth is biological. Now, tendon is extremely tough. It doesn't require much of blood at all. It just uses those slippery little things. There is some blood, but very, very, very little. And it primarily turns into what they call basalts, which are a tough, grainy, tough rock. You know, basalts are just your basic average looking rocks. All right, but they're not just average rocks. Like that, they'd call that basalt. I would call that a dragon scale. And that right there is the tab that locked it in. And this had blood in it. That's where there was blood right there. Put a little water on it to show you. I'm telling you, we have missed so much because we just, you know, they won't listen to what's obvious. There's a blood fed there, and it came down from here. Look at it on a microscope. You can't miss it. It's just undeniable. That blood is entering in there, and it's nice red blood, and eventually it comes out down here, which I think somehow meets up with the next scale. Right here in that little niche. It gives it blood so that it can do what it has to do, and they go layer after layer after layer after layer. And this little latch right here I can feel it with my finger. You probably can't see it, but it's a little bump right here, which would lock it in. I think something like that. And then this is the part over here. If you look at this in a microscope, it's got a layer of what I call slurpy, which is the small leucine-rich proteins. And it's bundled up here a little bit. It's coagulated here. I don't know if you can see that texture. It's got a little bundle here and a little bundle here of gooey stuff. They would have let it slide back and forth. I don't know, maybe that's better. Maybe not. But as far as I'm concerned, that's from some kind of reptile. Big gigantic alligator or something, I don't know. These things are undetermined at the moment. They need to be looked into. But these are basalts, and they're the heavy-duty rocks that people just think are rocks. But they were some kind of biology at one point, and primarily tendon. All right, let's just finish it up. But let's listen to what he has to say. He brought that 10-foot core back. And I'm going to get it all the way out to where he starts talking about God. He's deeply religious. Deeply religious. But I'll bring you up to the point of the material evidence. Here goes.
3 meters. And it was still unconsolidated, but it compressed very quickly. And you never sank in, but just a couple of inches. You can't get lost on the moon. Where's back? How do you get home? Turn around and follow your tracks back if you're not sure. You always left tracks up on the moon. Here's the top. We're up on top of Stone Mountain. John's taking my picture here. It's a beautiful view across the valley of the mountains of the moon where we landed, the Descartes Highlands. That's John. He's got the red stripe. I'm taking a picture. And that black object in the far distance over there I said, John, let's go sample that rock. He says, too far away. I said, oh, come on, John, let's go. So I talked him into it. So we started jogging, and we jogged and jogged and jogged, and the rock got bigger, bigger, and bigger. And when I got there, there's this rock up there, and that's the size of the rock.
All right, let's take a look at what we see. That, to me, would probably be black blood. That's what I would guess from my look at that. Here goes. Which would be magnetite.
And we called it house rock. And I got this little hammer in my hand. So I woke up, and you couldn't swing very hard. You sort of did like this. Whack, I hit it, and a piece came off about the size of a grapefruit. So we got a piece of the rock up there from a house rock, we called it. Very special moment for me. This is the only picture of a family up on the moon. And I left this picture of my family, and we have 2 boys. One's here. I don't know where they're sitting inside, but Tom is now airline pilot for Delta Airlines. He was a fighter pilot, and he's the guy, the kid in the red shirt, his brother. And his brother Charles is a businessman in Greenville, South Carolina, and Dottie and I last June we celebrated our 62nd wedding anniversary.
All right, from here on he gets, into religion and how we have to give back and how important it is to be compassionate and all these things. But, I wanted to show about what is on the moon, and this was a fabulous video to a guy that's actually talking about in great detail what they found. And I think I would like to know what that house rock is made of, and some other stuff too. I'd love to talk to him.